Yuji was currently walking through Shibuya. He was getting pretty close to the edge of Shibuya, however, that did have some problems itself. The edge of Shibuya was the lowest priority for evacuation. After all, there was the least transfigured humans as well as curses there. But Yuji was now just staying there, as he could hear a scream from a group of civilians. As a transfigured human that was quite a bit stronger than the average rushed towards a civilian about to attempt to grab their head and slam them into the ground. But just before the hand could reach the person's face, Yuji was able to move them out the way and carry them as he put them down before giving them directions. As he looked towards the transfigured human, cracking his knuckles. This transfigured human was the oddest so far, as most of the ones he had seen had either taken on a monster-like shape or dinosaur-like shapes, but this one was much more humanoid. In fact, it was only a little bit taller than Yuji, as it had spikes on its shoulders, its body looked armored, and it had a tail, but most notably it was salivating, and when the saliva hit the ground it burned. It was acid. This transfigured human was the combination of 60 humans into one, similar to the creature he had made to fight against Todo and Canon. However, thanks to more humans and a more pristine control Mahito had, it was able to be more balanced. They were made to be extra security in case any of them got past the first line of defense Mahito had made. However, Sukuna had prevented that from happening, so instead Mahito released this transfigured human out into the wild, as a wide smile rose on the transfigured human's face. After all, it was able to recognize who Itadori Yuji was, and they were very excited to battle against them, as Yuji glared before the two rushed at each other and clashed fists, causing parts of the ground to break underneath them. However, neither of them budged from each other's strength. Both of them were equally matched in terms of physical strength, as they clashed their fists again and again before they began to enter into a flurry of fists, with each of them clashing. And with each hit and clash against each other, the ground became more and more destroyed. However, Yuji was eventually able to predict and see through its movements, deflecting one of the punches, as he quickly went in and went for a punch on the transfigured human's gut, or at least that was his plan, until the transfigured human opened its mouth and fired a huge wave of acid right towards Yuji. And Yuji was just barely able to hear on time he was going to launch out acid. Not wanting to see what would happen, Yuji jumped back and barely managed to avoid dodging the acid. However, while some of it did land on his leg, it wasn't anything too bad. After all, if it was just pain, it wasn't going to stop Yuji. The transfigured human was able to tell quickly that it was not going to beat Yuji in direct hand-to-hand, so it began to rapid-fire bursts of acid towards Yuji. As Yuji began to hop backwards in order to avoid those acid bursts, but he knew he couldn't let that thing have distance, because the more and more distance it would gain, the more and more dangerous it would become. So Yuji was quick to adapt by punching a large piece of the ground and throwing it at the transfigured human. However, this was no real issue for the transfigured human. After all, the transfigured human was just as physically strong as Yuji, so all we need to do is punch right through it. But this was exactly what Yuji wanted, as Yuji took advantage of this chance to land a punch on its face before he began to land a barrage of punches on its body. Each punch was staggering the transfigured human, but there was something else that he was able to notice. With each of these punches, they felt harder and harder, almost like Yuji was getting a little bit stronger. Which was exactly the case. Yuji's body was still adjusting to when Sukuna had used a black flash in it and trying to regain that muscle memory, allowing him to grow faster as he was battling. He just needed a catalyst that was actually able to take the punches to allow him to grow and force him to grow. But the transfigured human was done taking this combo, as he grabbed Yuji by the arm, catching one of his punches and pulling him into a headbutt. The transfigured human was just about to turn and slam its tail into Yuji midair, but Yuji was able to grab the tail before beginning to spin around and throwing the transfigured human right into a wall. The transfigured human was able to stop its momentum via using its tail and implanting it into the ground before firing out a huge burst of acid, knowing that Yuji was going to dodge, which he did. And as Yuji dodged, it took this chance to land a punch on Yuji's face before grabbing him by the gut and throwing him into the ground, as revenge for that hand-to-hand combo that Yuji had just landed on him. And right before the transfigured human could go for another blow, it suddenly felt several blows all across its gut. During the time that Yuji was landing that combo, he actually wasn't using too much curse energy with those strikes. After all, he was setting up for the Divergent Fist. He lagged out his curse energy very intentionally in order to set up for this combo, as Yuji focused a great deal of curse energy towards his hand, going for a black flash, which he landed, launching the creature off of him and out of the crater that they were currently in. As Yuji jumped out of the crater looking towards the transfigured human. The transfigured human's armor was currently very heavily cracked, but it was not broken. However, while this creature was definitely in pain from that strike, it was able to stand. In terms of durability, this beast was more durable than Hanami was, while it was also less durable than true form Mahito, it wasn't by much. But now with this weak spot, this battle was entering into its final hour, as a transfigured human released a roar, entering into a more animal-like state than before, as it rushed at Yuji with the ground breaking underneath it with each step, and it landed a punch on Yuji, and while Yuji did succeed in blocking it, it sent Yuji flying. However, the transfigured human was not done yet, as it began to launch a flurry of punches. However, each of them were being deflected by Yuji. But this was when the transfigured human began to think, and it took advantage of the appendage it had. It wrapped its tail around Yuji and used it to throw him to the side while splitting 3 large bursts of acid towards him. Out from Yuji's pocket, he took out 3 rocks and threw them towards the burst of acid in order to attempt to disperse them, or at least to try and slow them down so he could move out the way. While Yuji was jumping, the transfigured human closed the distance and attempted to land a punch on Yuji's face. However, this punch was caught as Yuji used his punch to pull it in so he could punch the transfigured human in its weak spot. As Yuji began to move faster and faster, the creature seeing Yuji more like a demon covered in black with blue flames around its fists. And Yuji was landing a barrage of punches on the weak spot, eventually finishing it off with one final punch to the weak spot. With that final punch, the transfigured human was sent flying into and through a building, and the building collapsed on the transfigured human, finishing off the transfigured human once and for all. As Yuji looked over to the collapsed building with a neutral face. No, it wasn't neutral, it was sad. In truth, Yuji didn't want to kill the transfigured human. He felt bad that he had to, mainly because from what he could tell, those were definitely innocent people or just people in general, and all people in his mind did have a value to their life. But that sadness was quickly replaced with an anger because of the fact that Mahito existed and was doing this to so many people, and he was going to make sure that Mahito was dead by the end of this for everything that he had done. As Yuji began to focus for a moment, he needed to turn all of these negative emotions into curse energy. He needed to get stronger, mainly because he could tell by this alone that Mahito was getting stronger and stronger with each and every passing day, and it was his duty to kill Mahito, but that was when his thoughts were interrupted as 3 people approached him. 3 people that he didn't expect, which immediately put Yuji on heavy guard. As Yuji asked if the 3 of them had come back to finish him off, with Choso, Eso, and Kechizu explaining that that wasn't the reason they were here and that they actually needed to talk. But they also explained that they could help him take out Mahito, since they knew Mahito was the person that they were after, and that immediately made Yuji let down his guard a little bit as they explained the entire situation of their siblingship and how Yuji Itadori was their brother. This gave Yuji a lot to think about, but he did have something he wanted to ask his new brothers, if he could even call themselves yet. He wasn't actually too sure how he really felt about all of this, but he was going to spend basically the entire night and whatever next few days thinking about this, as he asked them if they could help him take out transfigured humans and cursed spirits, and they all agreed. After all, anything to help their brother. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a massive cursed spirit was fighting against a massive transfigured human. The transfigured human was around the same size of a building, as well as the cursed spirit being even bigger than that. However, the transfigured human was actually dominating the cursed spirit right now. Currently, there were 2 sorcerers present, those 2 sorcerers being Nobara Kugisaki and Nanami Kento. Both Nobara and Nanami were currently watching the ongoing battle, not because they didn't want to take out both of them, but more importantly because they knew that right now the cursed spirit and the transfigured human were likely going to take each other out, or at least one of them was going to take the other out, and because there were no civilians nearby thanks to Nobara and Nanami evacuating them, they could just let them fight for now. As Nobara was preparing a large amount of nails, their plan was going to be pretty simple, with Nobara playing support and Nanami going in for the direct attack. Of course, Nobara was pretty sure that she could actually help Nanami directly, however this was just a better method for their fighting style. But Nanami had a different hope for this battle, which was that Nobara was going to surpass him in this fight. After all, he could already sense that Megami and Yuji were much stronger than them, and Nobara was on the cusp of surpassing him. But then they could hear the sound of a cursed spirit dying. The transfigured human had ultimately ended up winning this battle, as Nanami led the charge, taking out the 7-3 ratio cleaver and activating his curse technique, slamming it against its face and sending it flying. Which Nanami knocking it back did surprise both Nobara and Nanami, however they were quickly able to tell that despite the fact that it was massive, it didn't really have that much power backing up to it, or at least it didn't have as much power as its size would imply. As out from the building, several nails went flying at the creature, stabbing right into its body before Nobara activated Hairpin on it, causing several spikes of curse energy to rise out inside of it. As the beast's body began to fall down to the ground, and Nobara and Nanami both looked very surprised. After all, they were not expecting it to be that easy. Did the cursed spirit really just weaken it that much? However, they very quickly realized they let their guard down too soon, as steam began to come out from the transfigured human. The transfigured humans suddenly had their body heat massively increase, as out from the steam several spikes were launched out that Nanami was very quickly able to dodge, but he wasn't able to dodge what came next. As a transfigured human that looked to have a knight-like appearance quickly rushed out from the steam and punched Nanami straight in the face, burning his cheek in the process, as Nanami was sent flying back. While Nanami was being launched back, a swarm of cursed spirits got him and pulled him away from the battle. However, there was something else that was much more noticeable this time around, which was the fact that this was not a transfigured human, but this was a cursed spirit. Mahito had another theory that he wanted to test out through this transfigured human, which was how cursed spirits could end up working if they were in an area surrounded by negative emotions. Cursed spirits were spawned from a large amount of negative emotions, so in theory, if he was to put a cursed spirit that was just about to be born inside of a human, or inside of several humans that all had negative emotions through the roof, which Mahito used his technique to enhance negative emotions of, then it might end up spawning a significantly stronger cursed spirit. So this was exactly what Mahito had done. He had made a massive transfigured human snake and used that in order to create a large amount of negative emotions as a farm, all to funnel into one cursed spirit. Now, this cursed spirit was not on par with any of the disaster curses, however they were certainly stronger than the finger bearer. As the cursed spirit looked towards Nobara's direction, as they were able to recognize where Nobara was, but not exactly, just her general location and direction. As it jumped off the ground, leaving some burn marks on the ground as well, while steam continued to erupt off its body and it flew at Nobara. Nobara, as a counter, launched out several nails in order to try and hold back its approach, but it lifted up its hand and launched out a wave of spikes in order to counter the nails. As it went right through the building and attempted to grab Nobara by the face in order to try and throw her through the building, Nobara was just narrowly able to avoid it by sliding under and launching one of her nails at the cursed spirit's gut. With Nobara activating Hairpin, knowing that it probably wasn't going to reach it itself, but with this cursed energy spike it should have a chance. However, the cursed spirit was quick to react as it caught the cursed energy before turning around and punching Nobara hard into the ground. This ended up leaving some burn marks on her body, as she could immediately feel that this cursed spirit had a very hot temperature. Very sadly though, Nobara controlled two of her nails to make them fly behind the cursed spirit and activated Hairpin once more, stabbing them into the cursed spirit's arm. This gave Nobara enough time to make some space between herself and the cursed spirit. But it wasn't long until the wounds that the nails had caused had ended up healing on the cursed spirit's body. It was clear it was going to take a lot more than that to put it down. With Nobara lifting up 9 of her nails, all 9 of them floating in the air and surrounded by cursed energy, effectively telling it to bring it on. As Nobara began the charge by launching out all 9 of the nails before going herself in for direct combat. However, not all of 9 of the nails went for them. In fact, only 5 of them actually went directly for them, while the other 4 began to spin around the cursed spirit. The cursed spirit, though, was able to basically punch away all of the nails that were coming at them, as Nobara took advantage of one of the attacks, slamming her hammer into the cursed spirit's side. Furthermore, even though the nails were deflected, they remained floating in the air, now starting to float around in a circle, as 2 more of the nails began to fly at the cursed spirit on its back. Nobara had gained a bit more control over her nails and her curse technique thanks to all the people that she had been fighting over the last day. As the cursed spirit groaned from the strike to its side, while quickly deflecting the nails that were coming at them, but Nobara told them that he was focused on the wrong thing. As Nobara had jumped into the air while taking out another one of her nails, focusing a great deal of curse energy into it in an attempt to slam it down into the cursed spirit's head. However, that was when Nobara was wrong, as the cursed spirit was able to quickly turn around and get out of Nobara's grasp before grabbing her by the face and slamming her down into the floor, and slamming themselves both down through several floors. As Nobara ended up coughing up a great deal of blood from that. After all, that hurt like hell. As the cursed spirit began to get up, thinking that it had ultimately won this battle, and now it could take things pretty easy. But right before the cursed spirit could look away, a nail slammed right into the cursed spirit's head as Nobara activated Hairpin. Even though she was in a great deal of pain, she was still able to fight, and she had this insane look in her eyes. But not just that, this hairpin wasn't just a normal hairpin, as it hurt a lot more. This was a hairpin that was a black flash, and this cursed spirit, even though they had caused quite a great deal of damage to Nobara, they had put Nobara in the zone. As Nobara used her legs and her hands to grab hold of the cursed spirit while it was distracted by the pain before jumping off of it, as she jumped high into the air towards the nails that were still high up and began to smack every single one of them down towards the cursed spirit. But this was not just going to be an ordinary hairpin. No, through the black flash, Nobara had a new move in mind, a new move to make herself significantly stronger, as she called this move Hairpin Crucifix. As rather than just 9 massive spikes of curse energy rising out from its body, all across its body hundreds of smaller nails of curse energy began to course through it. A much more focused attack made to make large amounts of damage spread throughout the entire body. As the cursed spirit faded away, dying as a result of this attack, and Nobara was about to faint, but Nanami was quick to catch her. As Nanami had to admit they were very much impressed by what Nobara had just done. After all, in that moment it was pretty clear to them that Nobara had also surpassed Nanami. They were going to need to find a resting place though for now, mainly because of the fact that Nobara and Nanami were both going to need some time to rest after such a battle like this had just occurred. However, someone ended up approaching the two of them, which caught them completely off guard. This person was a sorcerer that had the capability of healing themselves as well as others, a special grade sorcerer, Yuta Akotsu, as they healed both Nobara and Nanami, before asking Nanami a very simple question: where is Yuji Itadori? Meanwhile, Mahito was back at his makeshift base of operations, as he could sense both of his main tests that he wanted to see ending up dying on the battlefield, and he thought that they were rather impressive. One of the tests were a much more powerful transfigured human, the one that had battled against Yuji Itadori, where it increased the body's physical strength, speed, and endurance, but it also increased the body's ability to create stomach acid, which was what they had used against Yuji. As he was very impressed with how durable they were, considering that they were able to take several blows from Yuji, as well as take a black flash from Yuji and still be capable of fighting. After all, he realized in that moment that he had created a transfigured human that was close to Hanami's level in durability, and was going to be very helpful for their next goal. Though there was the issue of these transfigured humans weren't really resource efficient, mainly because of the fact that it required 60 humans to even be able to do that. As Mahito began to think on ways he could end up pouring out more of his curse energy into them, while he also looked at the other experiment that he had done, the cursed spirit. Now, he couldn't really sense how well the cursed spirit did in the fight as well, mainly because it wasn't something under his control, but he could sense its initial level of strength, and it was quite a strong cursed spirit. By the ranking system, it would be around the level of a special grade curse. However, being a special grade curse kinda isn't really much, mainly because, as Sukuna said himself, him and the finger bearer are on the same grade. Both these experiments were so far successes, and he could already feel that he was getting stronger. He could feel that he was getting closer and closer to being ready to kill Toji. After all, he knew he couldn't beat Toji in a one-on-one fight, and with enough strong allies like this, they would stand a pretty good chance against him. In a way, Mahito had to thank Toji. After all, he was copying Toji's method in a way. It was Toji who taught Mahito by example the strength of teaching others and having strong allies around him. Mahito was so focused on himself, and same with Kenjaku, that didn't even really think of that at all. Of course, they did use Mekamaru as something, but that was nothing more than a distraction. Now Mahito was actively trying to make strong allies. However, he was now moving on to his next experiment, which was Panda. After all, Panda had a unique ability, which was the ability to make his body and soul take on the shape of one of its cores, and Mahito wondered, if he could mimic this ability, he might be able to apply this to his own transfigured humans, which would end up significantly amping them. Maybe it could be possible that he wouldn't need to combine so many of them to make powerful transfigured humans, but just copy this methodology and use it for his own. At the same time, he had already transfigured Granny Seance as well, mainly because Granny Seance had another advantage that he really wanted, which was her curse technique. Her curse technique allowed her to bring people back from the dead while using a body as a husk, while not summoning the soul, allowing them to have full control over them. And by extension, Mahito knew exactly how he was going to use this. Mahito was going to use Granny Seance in order to bring back hundreds of strong sorcerers, and then control all of them. The issue was that Mahito was going to have to get their DNA, but that could wait for now. Granny Seance was more so a background project, but now that they were transfigured, he could just keep them in his pocket. And finally, we return to the underground network, as Megumi is brought in by one of the sorcerers that worked here, a pink-haired sorcerer that was previously a third year at Jujutsu High, but no longer was one, Hikari Kinji.